Well, it is 11:31, so Roberta, would you be so kind as to give us the land acknowledgement?
Sure.
Thank you.
We begin by calling forth our love of the land. We say thank you for the beauty, sustenance, and abundance of Mother Earth. We draw on peaceful and mutual relations between humans and other humans, as well as between humans and those beings, powers, and elements who have cared for the rest of us since the beginning of time. We call out in protest against any practices that destroy, poison, pollute, or harm anything or anyone on Mother Earth. We acknowledge the caretaker's creator placed upon the lands on which we are currently standing, the Haudenosaunee, in particular the Seneca. We uphold the sacredness of this land, and we thank the Haudenosaunee for the stewardship they have demonstrated and their gratitude to Creator for having been given the gift of this land. We ask that land be returned to them, especially sacred ceremonial land, that their agricultural, fishing, and hunting rights be restored, that their burial grounds be recognized and respected, that treaties be honored, that stewardship of these lands be returned to them, and that all means of sovereignty be reestablished. We admit that we are only living on this land due to the violence, forced relocations, confused ideologies, corrupted spiritualities, and the inhumane and unjust treatment and intentional genocide of Indigenous people. We realize that a process that includes the elements of truth-telling, remorse, reparations, and healing of intergenerational trauma can foster reconciliation. We would also ask for policies, practices, and systems of justice for humans and other than humans. Lastly, we agree that the rights of Indigenous peoples to live by our own cosmologies, values, understandings, spiritualities, economies, relationships, ways of knowing, and governmental practices be honored. Kishalamian, Siwichaminan, Tomasinan, Walagunda Waking, Walisa Wakaning, Akwales Wakaning, Manishi Nanalekich. Creator, please help us to live in peace and friendship, beauty and goodness. We thank you. Let it be so.
Let it be so. Thank you so much, Roberta. And now let's introduce ourselves to Rabbi Jonathan. Barbara, why don't you begin?
I'm Barbara Green. I'm the board representative for Church of the Assumption to Rocky X. I've been with them since 2014, so it's been a while.
And Roberta, would you introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm the representative from the Interfaith Alliance of Rochester, and I'm also on the board of RockX.
And Duncan, our host.
I'm a deacon at the Southeast Rochester Catholic Community, also associated with Penfield Hope as a co-director and work on communications with RockX.
Thank you. And Ted.
Ted Polano, I'm on staff at Third Presbyterian. I'm also on the Poverty, Jobs, and Housing Task Force.
Thank you. Rebecca.
Rebecca Seegers, also on staff at Third Presbyterian Church. Thanks.
Thank you. Jackie Nelson. Jackie, would you introduce yourself?
Yes, good morning, everybody. I am Reverend Jacqueline Nelson. I'm a representative from Colgate Rochester Crozier Divinity School, attending on behalf of President Angela Sims.
Thank you. And are you still also at Asbury Methodist?
I'm not on the full-time staff there anymore, no.
Oh, okay. And Brittany.
Good morning. My name is Brittany Reed. I'm the advocacy coordinator at the Children's Agenda, which is an advocacy organization here in Rochester. And we also have an interfaith collaborative. And so I'm here to represent them.
Glad you're on board. And Henrietta.
Hello, everyone. Henrietta Harriet, Executive Director, RockX.
Good to have you on board. And Jonathan, would you be so kind as introduce yourself to us? Tell us all, whatever you want to say about your congregation, your relationship with Boys Buffalo, whatever, which is also a federation of faith and action.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for hosting me. And thank you for that wonderful land acknowledgement, Roberta. That was powerful. And I also come to you from Haudenosaunee lands in Buffalo, and am blessed to have the beginnings of a relationship with some people in the Seneca Nation. So thank you again. I am Rabbi Jonathan Freirish. My pronouns are he and him. You can call me Rabbi Jonathan or whatever else you're comfortable with. I'm very well acquainted with the idea that people can call me Rabbi Freirish and have nothing but disrespect in their minds, and people can call me nicknames from my childhood with nothing but great admiration. So however you are comfortable calling me is fine. I come to you as a professional organizer. I work full-time with Voice Buffalo. I am not a congregational rabbi anymore, thank God. For those of you who are serving in congregational positions, you have my sympathies, from which I organize quite a lot, which is that I get to offer generosity and grace and a lot of understanding for those of us who serve congregations, because it is a often thankless and very, very exhausting calling. And I appreciate very much just how much time and soul and effort goes into it.
Yeah.
So in terms of why I'm here today, I gather I'm here to help us talk about one-to-ones
Yes.
and other
And
basics in organizing.
Yeah. And I think that what I'd like to do is, as we wait for Reverend Wilkinson to join us, who's got an opening devotional, I'm going to read for you a prayer that Rabbi Jonathan shared with Faith in Action Training on April 25th of this year. He said, Shimon ben Shafach teaches, how did I do on that pronunciation, Rabbi?
You did okay.
Okay. How would you say Shafach?
I think it's Shimon ben Shatach. So you did.
Okay.
You came close.
I just didn't go hard enough on the question.
Almost all Hebrew has emphasis on the final, on the last or second to last syllable. So,
Thank you. Question matters deeply, and be careful with our phrasing, lest we reveal our bias and hear only what we want to hear, rather than what is true. And notes by Rami Shapiro, when investigating truth, do not settle for beloved opinions. Be careful that our words do not betray our desires and lead ourselves and others to flatter rather than enlighten. What we already know, the truths we need free us from the known, that we might see what is without the filter of how we so desperately wish it to be. Let me just say that last line again, because it's a doozy. The truths we need free us from the known, that we might see what is without the filter of how we so desperately wish it to be. And we will go ahead and I'll have Ralph and Debbie introduce themselves. Go ahead, Ralph.
Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Oh, yay. Everything's working.
Good.
My name is Ralph Carter. I'm an elder of Third Presbyterian Church, and I gladly serve on the board for ROCAX and co-chair Justice System Task Force. So
Thank
happy
you.
to be here.
Happy to have you with us. Debbie.
Hi, I'm Debbie Rosenfeld, and I represent the Rochester Baha'i community.
Good to have you all on board. We will not wait for William to come and give an opening devotional. We will trust that Shafach and Rami Shapiro have done that, and we'll have William pray later after he joins us. And now I want to introduce to you somebody who's already introduced himself to you, Rabbi Jonathan. We met him at Faith in Action training just last month. And we're so impressed with his presence and very impressed with the work of Boys Buffalo. So we hope to hear from him how that goes. And maybe we'll catch some insights to shore up our work. Jonathan, it's all yours.
So the teaching that you got from Denny, which she so generously shared, just in case you want to take a look at it, it's sometimes a little easier to see it, and I can do that. So this idea of questioning matters deeply, and hearing only what we want to hear, I think, is a really good introduction to the challenges of doing effective organizing. Effective organizing is at its heart relationship building. So this idea that the truths we need to free us from the known, that we might see what is without the filter of how we so desperately wish it to be. To see, as Denny emphasized, what is without the filter of how we so desperately wish it to be. So here's the thing. Every single one of us are relationship builders. We all do this in our lives. You are, I mean, you just gave me your wonderful credentials as people who are key individuals in organizations and houses of worship and advocacy groups in the Baha'i community. None of this happens without relationship building. Our regional director, Whitney, and I were just talking about this, and she said that the relationship building in organizing work is not so much the air as the water. We can get by without it for a little while, or we can get by with substandard relationship building. But we're not going to grow anything great without it. So what does this look like? Of course, there's no magic wand that we can wave to do this work aside from actually doing the work. And I know that each of you knows this, so because of who you are, successfully doing the work that you do. So to a certain extent, the question is, how do we consciously and intentionally do it? And how do we go into a meeting on behalf of ROCAX, on behalf of organizing that for which we are prepared, perhaps to be unprepared? And for those of you who are students of theology, my teacher on this is Martin Buber. And I'm happy to, at some point, if you want, do a close reading of Martin Buber as a way of sort of prepping us for this type of thinking. A good interaction, a transformative interaction, is one in which everybody's prepared to be transformed. So when I show up today to this meeting with all of you, I have no idea what's going to happen. I have an idea of the things I can talk about. I have a little bit of an idea of who I'm going to be meeting with, but really, I don't know anything at all. And if I come in with an agenda of exactly what it is that I'm going to accomplish, I have underserved every single one of us. I can be prepared for questions you may ask. I can have ideas of where we might go next. But truly, I need to embrace this encounter as the mystery that each and every one of us are by virtue of all being in the image of the divine. And of course, we are faith organizers. So we have to have something that underlies what we do that is informed by deeper meaning. And in my mind, the one-to-one can be fundamentally informed by the idea that there is God in that room, in this room, and God is represented by each and every one of us in the divine image. And if we're open to being transformed by one another, God enters the space between us all. Because, so you wanted some stories, but I'll take some questions first.
Well, I'll speak. And when you said coming into a room with an agenda, I have 24 years in the Army, so that's always what I did. And in some, well, and in some situations, that's right. But it's very helpful of you to bring up the point that here in an organizing, that's not right. Because then I might, and probably have, and everybody can probably attest to this, feel driven in a certain direction or not. And I think that might, your words might help me in the future to not do that.
So interestingly enough, Barbara, I have a great resource from a military perspective on this, or that incorporates a military perspective. It's a book called The Scout Mindset.
Thank you.
And one of my good friends is, I think he's now a major, and in the reserves, but you know, a career officer in the Scouts. And while the day-to-day of organizational stuff often feels like that regimented agenda, right? That we need to be accountable, that we need to know where we're going, we need to know what we're doing. As soon as something comes into our field of vision that requires alteration, we need to be responsive to that. Now, in the organizing work, we don't have the luxury of knowing that we are all bought into the same mission and agenda from the outset, right? When we've all signed up and we're all in the same unit, right? There's a reason we can have an agenda, because we have a structure that says we are doing this task and this is how we do this task, and we've signed up for that. But organizing requires constant re-enlisting and the listening to find out why it is that someone has shown up. We're not going to ever leave a successful one-to-one without knowing something new about the person we've met and knowing why they're there, at least a little bit of why. We have to understand each other's why, because then we can say, oh, we have this shared self-interest. I can go back to this person and ask them for input on this issue that I hope to work on because I know they care about it. Yeah, Denny, sorry.
I have a question then for you, and that is, why did you become a community organizer for Voice Buffalo?
I became, well, it's a long, complicated story. The first part of that story is that my ending serving as a congregational rabbi has a tragic dimension to it, which is that I was the victim of cancel culture. that I worked with somebody who was supposedly my partner and friend, who in fact had been keeping track of things that she found offensive. And she brought an ethics complaint against me to my rabbinical organization
Oh my God.
because I had called her attractive twice in public, because she didn't like being thanked, and because I had made a joke at her expense when she'd said something inappropriate. So I had said 50 Shades of Cantor. And I had used the phrase, which is entirely inappropriate in mixed company, but I thought I was in the company of friends, popping your cherry to a man in her presence who was new to our group. So those comments in a professional environment are entirely inappropriate if I'm with somebody who isn't a friend. I didn't know I was with somebody who isn't a friend. So she brought those. I accepted my censure, which was meant to be a censure without publication. And she, in fact, went public afterwards because she wasn't happy. My contract was curtailed at Temple Beth Zion here in Buffalo. And then she went to the Buffalo News. So if you Google me, you will find rabbi accused of sexual harassment.
Oh
which
my
of
God.
course I was not. But
Mhm.
in any event,
Yeah. But when one door closes, God opens another. And I thank God that
so
this other opened for you.
so there was reason for me to be searching for something else. So that's the downside. The upside is that I went into the rabbinate, into clergy work, into ministry for the sake of doing justice work.
Mhm.
That long ago, when Ginny, who was then we were just boyfriend, girlfriend, and we've now been together for quite some time. And she was not yet Jewish, but we were in college together, and she turned to me and said, so why don't you just go and be a rabbi? You do all this organizing among Jewish people and everybody else. Why not do it particularly for the Jewish communal life? And so I thought I was getting into justice work. Turns out I wasn't. Many of you may understand that not all of our faith institutions are oriented around justice. And in fact, that's what brings us together here. And so it is my understanding that we as people of faith have something that America needs, which is a belief in a better future. That the United States was founded and succeeded in getting a very small group of people exactly what they wanted, right? The upper echelon of white men who led the revolution got what they wanted in 1776. And they have only embraced a progressive vision of a future here when pushed to politically.
Mhm.
So you can see that Thomas Jefferson's good words that meant something very different to him about all men, in his words, are created equal, was used entirely differently by Abraham Lincoln when politically pushed for emancipation. That sentiment was used entirely differently by the suffragettes to accomplish what was a century-long effort to get women the right to vote in this country.
Mhm.
That sentiment was used entirely differently by FDR and JFK and RFK when push came to shove for the sake of real voting rights eventually for African Americans in this country.
Mhm. Yeah.
The vision for a better future here does not come from white Americans. It comes from Dr. King and Malcolm X and the idea of the beloved community. And I am motivated by the fact that it is teachers like Reverend Denise Walden Glenn who lead me in supporting a vision for real equity that starts first and foremost with racial equity and justice in this country.
Yeah.
And I see my own why, my own personal stake in this as one that my family is not safe if my neighbors are not safe. That my neighbors whose life expectancies are far less, if I were to move one zip code over, not on account of gun violence, but on account of health outcomes, my life expectancy would drop 15 years. 15 years between zip codes in Buffalo. Our lives are on the line. My children's lives are on the line. We can insulate in small communities and feel like they're not, but they are.
Mhm.
And so I am in this because our lives depend on it.
We understand that one-on-ones begin with the person who is inviting one-on-one to be very much aware of their own self-interest and evoke the self-interest in the other. And I wonder how you evoked your own self-interest. You have just clearly stated it is for racial equity. And I'm sure there's other things that at other moments, if we were to have a one-on-one with you, you would go deeper and say more. But how do you evoke others' self-interest? How do you get them to articulate their purpose, their justice issue, their passion?
So I am blessed to be the parent of somebody who turned 16 today, a 16-year-old son, and a 9-year-old daughter. And socializing as a child, as a kid in this world, is really hard. And socializing as a kid of two introspective readers is even harder. Because not everybody reads out there, and our kids' experiences are not in common with a lot of other kids' experiences. So we urge our kids to be interested, not interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And that is exactly what works in organizing work and one-to-ones. We need, we set out this idea that there needs to be a 20-80 or 30-70 breakdown between talking and listening in percentages of time in one-to-ones, because our job is not to impress. Our job is to communicate that we are impressed. So that means we need to ask good questions. I gave you an introduction that told you a lot about my understanding of betrayal in American society. And I would probably elaborate on it and say, emulating Dr. King's words, that we live in a society that has not done good on offering what was promised. Right? That there's a check that hasn't been cashed, in Dr. King's words. And then we've betrayed most of us, because most of us are not 1%ers or top 5%.
Mm-hmm.
And we continue to participate in that betrayal, a betrayal that hurts ourselves and everyone else. And then I would ask the question of, why this person has decided to actually accept meeting with me. Why have they come to a meeting with an organizer about justice? What keeps them up at night is a question a lot of people like to ask. I manage to be mostly tired, so I sleep through the night. So I often ask, what gets us up in the morning?
Please join us in asking questions of Rabbi Jonathan. Jonathan, how has your ability to ask questions and listen so attentively, so keenly, that you yourself are changed by what you hear? How has that moved Voice Buffalo? Because it's not only you who are doing it, it's a lot of people who are doing it.
So I can tell you, we react to each other and to our team and to events. So here we are on May 17th, 3 days after observing the year memorial of the shooting at Tops Market in Cold Spring on the east side of Buffalo. And our team created an amazing program of events. So amazing that the mayor not uncharacteristically took credit for it, even though he had nothing to do with it. Our directly impacted people of color on our team listened to what people in the neighborhood of Tops wanted. And what they wanted the presence of people who cared. They wanted opportunities to feel safe. And in response to that, we had 3 days of faith leaders and mental health professionals walking the streets of the neighborhood and offering 4 different locations for calming spaces. Those ideas were not my idea. They came out of conversations from really 2 of our leads on our teams, 2 of our organizers, in conversation with the people that live in the neighborhoods. And what we did when we succeeded was we brought allies and accomplices into those neighborhoods, and were led by directly impacted people of color. So while I occasionally walked on my own on Jefferson Avenue on Saturday, mostly I walked with other faith leaders and with faith leaders of color. And never was there more than 2 white people, 2 or more white people, not accompanied by or led by at least one or a whole group of African-American clergy or faith leaders or mental health professionals. We had no mental health professionals who were not directly impacted people of color in our calming spaces. And these were a result of us listening to what was desired, and also being led by, you know, I'm in the minority in our team at Voice Buffalo by being white and male. Actually, I'm the only white male person on the team, and one of only 2 white people on the team. And that's on purpose. And I also, as a faith leader, subordinated my desire to do my plan for what would be effective to those of the other people on the team, because I knew I could do better by following their lead and by playing a support role. This is very hard for us white faith leaders to do.
We do it. Some of us who aren't on the Zoom call today, but were with me meeting with Minister Franklin Florence on Monday night. You may have heard of his father, Minister Franklin Florence, and we were with Minister Clifford Florence. And Franklin is the incredible prophetic gift to Rochester, who actually is instrumental in opening Kodak, Bausch and Lomb, Xerox, Delco products, etc., to Black people getting decent jobs. You know, and that didn't happen until the 1970s. And he gave his life, and he made an enormous impact on the whole city. So some of us were we are working with them regularly, and we have only Roberta and Jackie and Brittany and Henrietta are Black people on this call, so only 4 out of 12. But usually we have Reverend Marilyn Cunningham, and we will be having definitely Reverend Wilkinson, who are people of color, joining us soon.
This is not about what needs to happen in terms of the makeup of our organizations. It's about
It's who
how
do we
we're-
listen to? Yeah.
Right. So, and it's about the work.
It is.
So when I walk on Jefferson Avenue this past weekend, it's not unfamiliar to me because I'm there all the time. We don't have an office that's adjacent to that neighborhood right now, although we hope to at some point in the near future. But the majority of my meetings are in a cafe that's nearby, that's on Jefferson Avenue.
Mm-hmm.
So that when I walk down the street, thank you, Roberta, for sharing that. I could tell your Haudenosaunee language proficiency was pretty awesome.
Talanixi. I was speaking Lenape.
Oh,
No escape Lenape, Hoking, Pennsylvania. Yuque, Nuikin, Seneca, Haki. But I'm a visitor in their land, just like you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for clarifying. I appreciate that. So, so I'm walking down the street there, and there are people who know me or know of me who are calling out Rabbi from across the street.
Mm-hmm.
So I wear a yarmulke most of the time. And when I was walking on Saturday on my own, I had a destination in mind. So somebody called out Shalom across the street, and I called out Shalom back. I went to my destination. I turned around and went and sat stood and chatted with the person, and had an amazing conversation. Because again, if we are doing this work, part of it is we're ambassadors, and we need to understand ourselves, as Roberta has actually so eloquently said, as guests in this place wherever we are, and to humbly enter into those spaces, which I attempt to do. I don't know if I'm very humble. I mean, part of the issue that I struggle with is due to who I am. Part of my power is that I feel like I belong in most places, right? And I walk in that way. And I have to be incredibly self-conscious of that impact on people. That my own sense of I have a right to be here communicates something different than I think it does.
Ralph, you said something to me, I think it was as recently as yesterday, about one-on-ones that I wonder if you could recall.
Would like to share a little bit about that. But you mentioned Jefferson Avenue, Rabbi.
We've got our own Jefferson Avenue right here.
Our own Jefferson Avenue, and walking in spaces that such as Jefferson Avenue in Rochester, which I'm come to know more and more as I'm volunteering, in a couple of churches there. But what I wanted to share about that, if I might, was it with all the homicides in Rochester, I learned of a group through First Genesis Baptist Church on Hudson Avenue that was organizing Walk, Talk, and Pray. Late afternoon, typically on a Thursday afternoon, and it was pre-scheduled for the summer months. And I found out about it Juneteenth last year. So I began going to these, and I was similar to what you were describing, the only person of white ancestry there, new to the group. Interestingly, the second gathering was on Jefferson Avenue. And it was very close to the church where I had been volunteering time in effort to help them reopen from COVID. And so it was a very humbling experience because there had been violence, on that block, and it was just 2 blocks away from the church where I had been volunteering. In the main, so it was an opportunity to the purpose was really to offer support for those people and on that avenue, and to embrace one another. And what I really observed was that the elders from the community coming to the street, and just being present, as dusk was approaching, and to offering presence, but also words of wisdom if requested. But it was very moving, and so I was very conscious of, and self-conscious, I guess, also. But it was a seminal event, and several of those opportunities are opportunities for personal growth, but also relationships, developing relationships. Well, I was so impressed with the having the opportunity to, when a group of us went to New York City to learn some of these ways of engaging, but also foundational with all of this is coming in a spirit of love. And it really resonates for me that the passage in the scriptures, which say, where 2 or more are gathered, in my name, then I am there. So it's I personally am sometimes very shy about sharing deeply of myself because it's of some past hurts. But I am finding that when we embrace one another in love, that there is truly holy strength in vulnerability. And so one can become brave in a sacred conversation where one might not be before, with a sense of the holy presence in our midst. So that caused that in that experience in New York City, I learned a lot about myself in the interactions. I also began to articulate, why am I in this work? What is drawing me to this? And it actually, I won't go into detail on it, but it goes back to early childhood, preschool, and then experiencing segregation, and then integration, and just all kinds of things. But a sense of a journey, and journey with people of color that I have met, and those in the community that I desire to join in solidarity, in support of equity and justice. So, I found it so profound, the idea, and it's such a simple idea, but my goodness, wouldn't it be marvelous if we really practiced it, to embrace one another in a spirit of love, so that we might find common ground and ways to collaborate, work together, support one another on our journey in life.
Thank you so much for sharing, Ralph. Would you mind if I asked you a question?
Oh, quite all right.
Did any of your encounters on your Jefferson Avenue lead to subsequent relationship building on your part?
Well, yes. It was actually in the church. It was laying tile at Grace Memorial, CME Church. And there was a woman there, Lentori Johnson, who we started sharing our stories, and she shared her story of the loss of her son to gun violence. And we both wept. We just cried and cried. So, I mean, it was hard to hear, but it was such a precious sharing. And it was in the fifth year of suffering that loss. She shared with me about turning that grief into something positive, and she described how her own children clammed up. They lost their voice. The trauma of the experience of losing a sibling, and so the idea emerged to find a way to actually do something pragmatic of having an essay contest for children in the city, to write about their experiences with gun violence, and what they would see, what their wisdom, what they would want to see happen in the community. And so that type of I had no idea that kind of encounter might be so moving and transforming.
Are you still in touch?
Yeah, well, now I've joined her board. She's forming a board, so now so some of the things that I've learned at RockX, gosh, we need to do a conflict of interest policy, the state needs, and so some of the pragmatic things that I can bring to the board. It's been very moving and very helpful.
So how have you gone forward and created power together?
Created
power together.
While you're thinking, Ralph, I can say that we presented Lentori Johnson on this Zoom call 2 months ago, and she told her story, and she encouraged us to support this essay writing contest that she does with city school children who have been impacted by gun violence. And the receptivity by this caucus was very moving. I heard myself say, when you get a great essay, I really would love the children's families' permission to make photocopies of it and send it to every congressperson because we need to have action on gun violence.
Okay, so have you identified legislation in the city of Rochester, in your county, in the state of New York, that would help address gun violence issues that you could work together with Lentori on?
No, that's a very good idea. we haven't gotten to that point yet.
Because you have,
but it makes a lot of sense.
You have shared self-interest. You have an
Yes.
existing relationship,
Mhm,
and you have an amazing event, an essay contest,
mhm,
which engages tons of people.
mhm.
And if you were to have call one of your local representatives and say, hey, you think you represent a whole bunch of people in a white suburb, but in fact, we all care about gun violence issues. And we need you to not just passively support a bill in front of our county legislature or the state legislature, but to sign on to it because we are your constituents and we care. That would be standing in power together.
You know, what's very interesting as you were just describing, Rabbi, you know, it would be very helpful to read the desires and dreams of solution that the essay writers
Yes.
are describing. That's what I'm thinking of at this moment. It's like, oh my goodness, that is a resource that's just
Yeah.
yeah, and the voice of young citizens of Rochester.
Mhm.
Barbara, you have your hand up.
Yes, I wanted to mention, it's not this Saturday, the celebration about that essay contest at 2
May
p.m.
20th. Yeah, May 20th.
And where is that? And is there going to be press there?
There won't be press there. It's at the county, in the atrium of the county office building, Main Street.
Thanks, because I didn't have that.
Everyone is invited. There will be it would be an essay. I think there would be the young woman who spoke at the Evan Dawson show on public radio. Will be reading, I think, her essay or a portion of it, and there will be some. It's all about the children. So there will be some entertainment with some rap and very should be a very good event from 2 p.m.
And will Boys and Girls Club of Rochester be the rappers?
I don't recall who's
Okay.
going to be there.
Yeah, Ralph has been very good, Jonathan, on Criminal Justice Task Force, listening, and connecting the dots with legislators. You know, he's always sending us out something to call this legislator or that legislator. And he also listened to a formerly incarcerated man. And we've gone to Albany with him on the 13th Forward, you know.
Has your formerly incarcerated person been tapped as a potential organizer?
He is an organizer with Citizen Action, and yes, he's organizing us too, because everything he says we show up for, but it's only a couple of us, and that's our dilemma. You know, Ralph and I have been with Dalil Muntakim on several occasions, demonstrating at City Hall, and we've been with Police Accountability Board demonstrating at City Hall. We've been at Rochester City School District demonstrating with Brittany Reed, who's on this call, on children's agenda items, and been with Asim Johnson, who is an organizer with the union, who is chairing one of our task forces. We've been to Albany with him on.
So you have been organized.
No. It's so inadequate that it makes me cry. Ralph and I are showing up at these things. Reverend Marilyn Cunningham is, but everybody else is not.
We're actually collaborating is what we're doing.
Yeah, we're collaborating.
We're still rebuilding from a period of
we haven't had an organizer in years.
I understand that, but all of you are organizers.
Yeah.
We're trying.
Oh, yeah. Right.
So, organizing is just relationship building. Ralph put in the chat, one-to-ones are key.
Yeah.
The question is, what people do you bring? not where you have been brought, but
Yeah.
who is with you? Who are your people? I am a baby organizer. I don't have a list of legislative wins to my record. I'm not somebody who's, gone out and gotten legislation passed. I have, a half a dozen or a dozen faith leaders who came and showed up and participated this past weekend in part because of the relationship building I've done with them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And now, because they showed up at something, I need to follow up with them.
Yes. Yeah.
I need to stay in relationship with them. I need to find out what is next for us. I need to offer leadership development for them. Because as faith leaders, as people of faith, we often think we have all the answers, but in fact, we are still in process. And doing an intentional one-to-one is a skill set. We have to practice it. We have to have an idea of where we're going next. We have to remember to set a next meeting or an expectation for a next meeting or an expectation for what's next at the end. Regardless of what we came in with, we have to be able to pivot to what we've learned to be able to turn that one-to-one from, wow, wasn't this a nice kumbaya moment I learned with this person about who they are, to now we're going to learn together about what we can do. And I applaud all of you for showing up for other people's actions. And you will do more than that if you show up for those actions with your people. Because the difference between mobilizing and organizing is the what next. Is we are in it together, and now we have power because we've shown up with our people, whomever they may be, for whatever the issue may be. And then when we have something that we care about, that because we know who all these people are, we can go back to the people for whom we've shown up and say, hey, I'm doing this thing with this group. Would you show up with us too? And the power of having these kids writing essays about that are anti-gun violence catalysts is huge, because people will show up for kids and with kids. And this is about doing with, not doing for.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can I jump in just for a second?
Please.
Rabbi Jonathan, good to see you again. Thank you for being here. This
Great
has
to
been
see
really
you.
helpful in terms of reinforcing some of the stuff that we heard a couple of weeks ago. Like, you hear it, we're just inundated with information. I'm new to all this whole thing, so just overwhelmed with information. But what you're saying really rings true. The process that you kind of outlined about, building the relationships, learning, hearing what's going on. And then the power question, I think, was really important when you asked about Lentori Johnson and, helping her with her power. And then the what's next. And so thank you. This has been really helpful. And I'm curious if we, as ROCACs, even our task forces or on the board, just stopped for a minute and thought about the relationships that we have in the community, and just kind of individually made charts or lists, and said, all right, where have these gone? Who are we all connected to in groups? And then began to say, where's the power? And then what's next? And so I just want to say, some of us who went to the conference or meeting on Friday, we have to do the homework that Whitney Walker gave us to do. We have a deadline. And we all put together a win that we were trying to work on when we went back home. And we came up with one, but now I'm wondering, this isn't for discussion right now. I'm throwing it out to because some of you are going to be at that meeting. Maybe it's more about the gun violence and the legislation, because we've already got this beautiful relationship with Lentori. She's been on the news, she's been on the radio. Maybe it's more like, maybe we shift from the thing that we talked about and shift to this, because I just feels like there's energy and there's already movement, power, and people involved. So that's it. Thanks.
Thank you, Ted. I just want to say that whenever I've brought up and Tori Johnson's story, and that's very often in my social circles and church circles, and because I go to a couple of different churches, I get this, well, New York State is all right on gun violence. It's not, this is not our problem. And yet it is our problem. So as well as working with Len Torrey and working with those families to give us permission to really run with those essays. There are other issues that I have to bring forward because I know of a couple of families. One is a family of 6 who I've known for 5 years, and they are going to be evicted this month. And there is no housing. We've got all kinds of groups working on trying to find them housing. Housing's another fierce issue.
So Reverend Denise constantly puts out the mantra, nothing about us without us is for us. Nothing about us without us is for us. My addendum to that is we are supposed to have a government of the people, by the people, for the people. However, it doesn't say with the people. So we need to rewrite our founding documents from an organizing perspective in the work that we do. Yes, nothing, almost Ralph, nothing about us without us is for us.
Who did you attribute that to?
Reverend Denise Walden Glenn, the servant leader, executive servant leader here at Voice Buffalo. And if we are going to do anything in power, it must be with, not for. And so all of the things that you identify as important problems, and then you narrow them down to issues. I know you were in the strategic campaign laboratory in New York, where we take something that's a problem that's huge and unsolvable and difficult to approach, and we all agree is a problem, and then we narrow it down to an issue that we can actually work on, or there's legislation pending about, right? We do that as the outcome of well-constructed, intentional relationships. We don't pick the issue to build relationships around. We build relationships so that we can all come together eventually around an issue that we may not even know yet. You already have a bunch of existing relationships upon which you can build. So focus on those. And again, bring people with you, because if each of you, right, you said there are 12 people on this call. So that's 11 of you in Rochester. If each of you have a different 10 people with whom you are in relationship on any number of things, then if gun violence is a rallying issue in Rochester, which I believe it ought to be, because it is here in Buffalo, then each of you might have 5 of those people who care similarly about that. Well, that's 55 people that you might bring to your next thing. And that's ROCACS bringing 55 people who care. That's something. That's power. And we are not, as Americans, accustomed to the idea that 55 people is power, because we forget that our legislators don't hear from us regularly. If you brought 55 people to a meeting with Senator Schumer would be thrilled to listen to all of you. Forgetting your congressional representative who would also be blown away by 55 people showing up to a meeting, forgetting your state assembly person and your state senator who would be unbelievably blown away because we can have successful research action meetings with 3 or 4 or 5 people on a Zoom call with an assembly person or a senator or a state senator. And I sat in a room a year ago, a little over a year ago, at the U.S. Capitol building with Senator Schumer and Reverend Alvin Herring and a bunch of us from Faith in Action, but it was only 20 or 30 of us
Mm-hmm.
who made the trip down to DC. We have much more power than we think we do. And every time we are told we are not, we are submitting to a white supremacy narrative.
At
Debbie,
our
you wanna say
last
something?
Zoom meeting a month ago, we had the Family Promise executive director who works with homeless families, and we had citywide tenants union director, and both of them encouraged us to call Jeremy Cooney, who is the only local legislator to Albany, who was once for housing and then stopped being supportive when he received great donations from a big realtor in New York City. So we were encouraged to call Jeremy Cooney, write Jeremy Cooney in the Rochester office or the Albany office to advocate for good eviction protection and good cause eviction protection and housing vouchers. And many of us did that, received no answer. Ralph has us calling Jen Lunsford a month or so ago. I know I followed up on that. But in the meantime, this family of 6 is going to be out of housing on the middle of June. And I just think housing is a win-win. We've got to affect our mayor and other people to stop giving tax breaks to builders of luxury apartments and start giving them to people who will build safe, affordable housing and give new meaning to the word affordable. Affordable doesn't mean somebody earning $85,000 and up. Affordable is somebody who's...
Denny, you have amazing passion on this issue.
I do. I love these people. I don't want them homeless.
Who's with you? Who have you spoken to who shares this passion, who you can go to the mayor's office with?
Oh, okay. Our refugee resettlement team. Yeah.
No.
Okay.
Not a team that's already associated and working on this with RockAxe, but who do you know outside of this group? Who have you spoken to? Oh, did I lose Denny?
She's thinking.
I think she may have hit the wrong button.
Well, Rabbi Jonathan, I think one of the people that Denny mentioned was here last month for this conversation, and she runs the Family Promise of Greater Rochester. She is one of those people as well. And one of the task forces here that I'm part of, we were told by City Council here in Rochester that good cause eviction legislation was not a local issue; it was a state issue. Obviously, it's not going to pass New York State. It didn't get into the budget for this year. So our committee met, and we're going to, there's a couple of council members that we know, and we're going to talk to them on the city council about what would it take to have a conversation again about good cause eviction and what is the legislation that has to happen to make it a local issue. So, I think this woman from Family Promise, who's the director, a couple of city council members are some of the people that we can connect with to have that conversation, but I'm sure there are many more.
Right. And also, when Denny talks about Family Promise, we, as a congregation in Parenton, were part of Family Promise locally before they went national. It was called RAIN. And there are numerous people from our congregation who are passionate about the housing issue, and they all volunteered in different capacities for that. So when Denny has a broad spread as far as who she can reach, and in one email message, all of the people who are impassioned with housing would show up for Denny and for an action. But you're right, we need to do the specific research with those people who
Right.
are affected by it.
I believe in all of you. I believe in Denny's power. I believe in the people you already bring. However, the question is, will they come with? And the only way we will get people to come with us is if they know we are already with them. You know, when Ralph pointed out, it's all about the one-to-ones. It's, do we have the trust with those people that they will bring us, that they will know they will come with us because we will come with them. Sorry, Denny, I didn't mean to send you running away.
Denny, you're on mute.
I mean, I can tell you that about issues that I care about and Reverend Denise's reaction to me. So I've been involved in climate justice for quite some time. And I'm connected with Green Faith in the Hudson Valley and Climate Can't Wait and New York Renews and a number of other people. And Third Act and Green Faith did a major action on March 21st in Albany. And I was tapped to come and be a speaker, and I was really excited about it. And I asked Reverend Denise if I would have voice of support to go. And Reverend Denise said, sure, if you bring somebody with you. I couldn't get anyone to come with me, so I took the day off and went on my own. The deal is, I had no people I could bring with me that day. I couldn't even get my son to come with me that day. He was too focused on school. So there are things that we have power in, and there are things that we don't. You have a lot of power. Focus your power on the relationships that you've got. And, you know, Denny's passion and connections on housing is powerful. And all of you need to say, okay, this is what we're going to do for the next month or 2 months or 3 months or 6 months. This will be our campaign. And we're going to adapt it based on who we meet and who's involved, but we're still going to do that. And we've got, you know, Ted, as you said, we have legislation at the state level that's not getting through, but we have an imminent need. So those people who are directly impacted by it need to be your partners too, because they will speak more passionately even than Denny on the issue.
Thank you. This is great guidance. It's wonderful. Thank you.
You know, I mentioned one-on-ones, one-to-ones. I really do. I think that is just so foundational, and I have not activated it, but I will be involved in the. It just hit me deeply when I realized that the exception clause to the 13th Amendment is the mechanism for continuing slavery and wage theft in the United States, even though we are so proud of the fact that we eliminated slavery and codified it, you know, with the Emancipation Proclamation and all that. But that exception clause, except if one is convicted of a crime and is in prison. Slavery is gone except there, right? And I was able to meet a fellow named Dwayne, and we shared our stories. And he's formerly incarcerated, now released, and I was just moved once again moved to tears. I don't know. I think it's in my later years. I'm just crying a lot. I don't know what is the crying all about, but embracing this, the spirit, I guess. And, but Dwayne has come to some of our things. And has spoken out. I mean, he's showed up at the city council, to help to protest when we were doing some protests there. But it really is all about relationship, isn't it? I've been wondering, there's of how to do this work, and I really do think that the one-to-ones and the relationship building and finding common ground is and being a part of each other's dreams and what the goals are, and especially around if we're working on equity. The statement you made was from Reverend Denise is so true and really resonates.
Well, and all of you know that when we talk about equity, we're starting with racial equity and justice. As a Faith in Action affiliates, the original sin of this country is the use of people as property. And as Roberta so eloquently pointed out, the use of people who are already here as an objective impediment to progress, as if people and their existence stand in the way of us. So those two original sins of America need to be the focus of our work, because a person at another Faith in Action event pointed out that we can focus on issues around immigration, around smaller picketed apart issues, but if we're not honing in on anti-Blackness and really anti-Indigenous people in this country, those fundamental things, we're not addressing what allows us to treat people so poorly in other situations, because it will always come up again, right? Ibram Kendi and other scholars in the 1619 Project have shown over and over again the degree to which, as long as we are willing to come up with a new idea by which we can use people, we will do so. The ideas morph, and we need to address the fundamentals. So at insecure housing, we know there is a racist cause. People, our entire setup in housing in this country is founded on a racist lie that African-American homeowners diminish home value in neighborhoods. Every single thing about our housing system is based on that lie that was perpetuated in the 1930s on zero data. Redlining, banks, the fact that African Americans didn't get access to the GI Bill for the most part. Oh, so looks like Denny said, my laptop died and my tablet does not permit chat nor voice nor video. So I can see and hear you, that I'm on the computer, but I cannot talk nor be seen. Very sorry about that. Well, we really, we're so sorry, Denny, because we want your wisdom.
We've all been there.
So if you can continue to run your one-to-ones with that expression of self-interest about the principles of what it is that we do as organizers who are faith-based, as organizers who are connected with faith and action, as organizers who are focused on racial equity and justice, as organizers who are focused on relationship building, because it doesn't matter that we're white, those of us who are white, this is still in our self-interest. And that part of our self-interest in terms of going with one another means I don't have, even if I have a good idea, I don't have a good answer. My good idea has to be done with someone. I have to run it by somebody. I have to listen to somebody else's good idea who is directly impacted in a way that I'm not. Because while we cannot ask African Americans to solve racism, because that, as Ibram Kendi has pointed out over and over again, is like asking a cancer patient to solve cancer. We do have to figure out on the treatments together.
Well, you've given us a lot of food for thought, at me anyway. And I think that Whitney's, what our feedback or input to Whitney will benefit greatly from what we've heard from you today. And I'm excited about getting together to prepare that, and to our future, working with Voice of Buffalo and obviously Faith in Action to move.
Well, I am a
Make
student
us
of
a
Whitney.
better-
I am a student of Whitney's, so I hope that my whatever I say helps you in fulfilling her homework, because I have homework from Whitney all the time too.
That's right, and I'm thinking that it better be good, what we give to her, or if not, she'll make it better. Whatever, she'll expand our thought. So yeah, she's great.
Yes, yesterday was the 6th anniversary of Whitney propositioning me into working with Voice Buffalo.
Well, she was successful, wasn't she?
We'll see.
Well, it's too bad. I guess then Reverend Wilkinson get some trouble, probably with connection or whatever. He's so often on the road when he's attending our Zooms. He's on the road 4 hours a day just getting his daughter to and from Rochester for Mary Cariola. So he's got a packed agenda. Too bad Denny's not available to do a closing prayer. I think we're coming up to that, but.
So Denny said one-on-ones need to set up. So let's give you some thought experiments and pieces to work on. Who are the people that you need to meet that you already know, to turn those acquaintances into a public relationship for justice? Right? Because the key to one-to-ones, and Ralph, you're a model for this, right? You are open to being greatly influenced by the people you meet. It's quite clear. You're on this path of transformation.
Yeah.
So what's the difference between that and something that leads to something else? And one of the ways we articulate that in the Faith in Action material on organizing is, what does an invitation into a public relationship for justice look like? As opposed to an invitation into a personal relationship. And that in that, we need to be clear about who we are and why we're there. We need to know our own self-interest. We need to be open to the idea that our self-interest might match up with a self-interest that we have yet to discover. And then we need to be thoughtful about, okay, what's our next steps with this person that are about what we might accomplish together in public, right? because we're asking people to engage in relationships with us that allow us to stand up together in public. And it's a different type of relating with that as a goal.
Well, I'm thinking, for instance, what I might do in this regard, then, since I just joined the board for generational engagement matters, which is the 501c3 that is sponsoring the essay contest. It might be really a good idea to do one-to-ones with other members of the board.
Excellent.
As a first step.
That's a super idea. They are kindred spirits, and they clearly care about something that you already care about.
And they're almost all people of color. I mean,
anybody else have a to-do list for one-to-ones next?
Denny has one in chat. One-to-ones with members of the ROCAX board.
For sure. I think Denny, the big ask of your ROCAX board is not only one-to-ones among each other, but what one-to-ones they think they ought to do. Because really, a board needs to be, what are the responsibilities of the ROCAX board? They have a fiduciary responsibility for ROCAX. Meaning they are the locus for your legal 501c3 status. But really, if they are going to be an active and helpful board, they're going to relationship build for sustainability. So they need to think about the people and the relationships that will make ROCAX thrive in the future. So what philanthropies do they need to be in conversation with to create a relationship that is sustainable for ROCAX? They're not going to be your political organizers per se, or your grassroots organizers. They are going to be, however, your funding organizers.
I'm intrigued by the idea of even just Jefferson Avenue, in my case, because I've been spending time, Jefferson Avenue, Rochester. I've been spending time in that area. Of there's the Muslim Charity Foundation. Has a outreach. Just a block and a half. From Graves Memorial Church. And I think a person who's associated with that is involved with Roku, Rebecca, on the national white nationalism kinds of efforts. So it'd be kind of, interesting to, and just helpful just to make some of that, have some, perhaps have some, conversation with folks associated with within that space, which is very close to the church, and just talk about the neighborhood.
Well, you already have a good multi-faith presence here, because you're not just Christians and Jews and Muslims. You're also Baha'i, which is great. We're always working to get beyond sort of our big threeness, which is something that Faith in Action is also really working on. It's a challenge and that we all need to undertake. And I think the degree to which you can engage the Muslim community in partnership is huge, because there are a lot of Muslims in our communities that are not engaged with us on this stuff. All right, it looks like we're approaching 1 o'clock. And Brittany put the Interfaith Collaborative hosting a kickoff lunch on Thursday. So thank you for putting that in the chat. And is asking all of you to RSVP for it. And Denny asks, we need to ask Reverend Marilyn today if she would like us to walk with her on Shelter Street since recent killing of a man who simply answered his front door in the middle of the wee hours of a recent morning. That's another really important cause. And I know you were supposed to have some form of blessing. Is it okay if I offer one for a closing?
That would be great. And we want to thank you for being with us today and sharing your wisdom. That is very much appreciated. And apologize that Denny isn't able to say thank you herself, but we do this as a collaborative. Thanking you for your presence.
Please. It's really my honor and a privilege and a blessing to work with you on this. We are all in process on this. There is no completion, right? There is no accomplishment. There is just getting to do better together a little bit more. And thank you, Denny, for inviting me. And Ralph, you said also possibly with Trinity Emmanuel Church on Shelter Street and Jefferson Avenue. So I'm going to offer you a blessing from the Jewish tradition. This is from the book of Numbers. Yivrachecha Adonai v'yishmerecha. May God bless you and watch over us all. Ya'er Adonai panav elecha v'chuneka. May the face of the divine, may the face of the universe, may infinite light shine upon us and bring us grace. Yisa Adonai panav elecha v'yasem lecha shalom. May that same face turn towards us positively, offering upon us wholeness on our paths as we seek it together. May we seek it together and find with each other paths forward that bring wholeness to all that we do. And let us say, Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much.
Thank you all for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. And I look forward to whatever comes next.
Thank you. We do
All
too.
the
I do
best
too.
to all your efforts.